dim light of the hideout flickered, casting eerie shadows over the worn furniture and scattered equipment. The air smelled faintly of old wood and gunpowder, mingled with the metallic tang of dried blood. The Carrion Eaters were sprawled across the room, each absorbed in their own activity. In a corner, Javier sat cross-legged on the floor, his eyes fixed on a pen hovering in mid-air. His fingers twitched slightly, and the pen spun lazily before zipping across the room to land perfectly upright on a nearby table. He grinned, picking up a knife next and sending it spinning with precise telekinetic control. The others occasionally glanced his way, but no one commented. His powers were impressive, and they all knew it, but they came with their own price. Leon sat on a torn armchair across the room, his arms folded tightly over his chest. His dark eyes flicked between Javier and the floor, his mind a storm of conflicting emotions. The question of Anthony's death tormented him, growing louder with each passing moment. He clenched his jaw, glancing at Javier again, his fingers tapping rhythmically against his arm as he tried to muster the courage to speak. On the couch, Stephanie lounged with a casual grace, her feet propped up on a battered coffee table as she gazed at her forearm, now made of shadows. Since the battle with Mr. Chainsaw, she had refused to draw on the power of her ichor to regenerate it, preferring its void prosthetic instead. Her sharp eyes flicked toward Christina, who sat perched on a stool, cleaning a delicate sculpting tool. With a sly smile, Stephanie tilted her head.
So, what's it like being married to a midnight fiend?
Christina paused, her movements freezing for a moment. Her gaze met Stephanie's, calm but guarded.
Complicated. He doesn't want me here, but I don't want him tied to the cord either,
she said simply, returning to her work. Stephanie raised an eyebrow, intrigued by the tension in Christina's voice.
Must be tough. Two sides of the same coin, huh?
Christina's grip tightened on the tool.
What about your arm? The preacher told me you can grow it again, but you seem not inclined.
Stephanie broke eye contact, looking to the wall next to her.
I am one with the void. The flesh is merely a vessel for my soul. This arm, though, is an extension of my will. It is my true self.
Across the room, Wade leaned against the wall, arms crossed as his eyes flicked toward Stephanie. His usual relaxed demeanor was absent, replaced by a quiet tension. He watched her with a measured gaze, his suspicion evident. Stephanie noticed but chose not to react, instead settling deeper into her seat, a faint smirk lingering on her lips. Leon exhaled sharply, his decision finally made. He uncrossed his arms and leaned forward, his gaze locked on Javier.
Javier,
he began, his voice steady but laced with something darker. Before he could continue, the door to the hideout creaked open and Jacqueline entered. Her tall figure and commanding presence filled the room, instantly silencing everyone. Her sharp eyes scanned the group before settling on Leon, whose words died in his throat.
You have been summoned,
Jacqueline announced, her voice cold and direct. Tension rippled through the room. Javier stood first, a grin tugging at the corner of his lips as he cracked his knuckles.
Well, that sounds fun.
Leon swallowed his words, his hands clenching into fists as he rose. Whatever he needed to say to Javier would have to wait. The group gathered their gear and followed Jacqueline out, their casual downtime already feeling like a distant memory. The Carrion Eaters passed through a narrow hallway, their footsteps muffled against the threadbare carpet. Jacqueline pushed open a creaking wooden door, leading them into a dimly lit room where Hector awaited. The room was sparse, dominated by a large table covered with maps and documents. Hector stood at the head, his imposing frame casting large shadows on the walls. As they entered, Hector's sharp eyes scanned them.
Good, you're here. Listen carefully, this mission is crucial.
They gathered around the table. Hector gestured to a map, its corners held down by heavy, worn books.
After the recent escape from the dead man's prison, one of the Nosferatu we freed, the lost one, shared critical information. He spoke of a buried treasure, something tied to one of Dreadford's ancient evils. The High Priestess ordered that this treasure should be recovered. The lead to this treasure lies in a map and notes left behind by the Lost One, when he fled the King's court during the Great Betrayal. These items are in a safe in his abandoned room at the Old Manor, the former base of House Morrigan.
how can you be sure it's still there? It's been over a century.
Leon's brow furrowed. Hector's expression hardened.
The map and notes are likely still in the Lost One's safe. The old manor has been untouched since the Great Betrayal. No one in the King's Court dares go near it, not since it became Morgan's lair.
Stephanie tilted her head.
Morgan?
Hector's jaw tightened.
Morgan is Oppenheimer, Jolene, and Akasha's sire. She's one of the most dangerous Nosferatu in Dreadford.
Javier smirked, leaning forward on the table.
Dangerous? Sure, but we've handled dangers before. So what's the big deal?
Both Oppenheimer and Akasha want nothing to do with this mission. They won't even use their powers to scout the area. They refuse to leave so much as a psychic trace connected to the old manor or Morgan.
Javier leaned back in his chair, his lips curling into a smirk.
Oh, so they're scared. Doesn't mean we should be.
Jacqueline's voice cut through the room.
You've never faced anything like her, and if you make it to the other side, you won't encounter anything like her again. She's not your objective, though. Get in, retrieve the map, and get out. Be fast and be quiet. Do not engage. This is a stealth mission.
Hector nodded at Jacqueline before continuing.
There's another complication. The old manor is deep within the King's Court territory. Our plan is to transport you there during the day, using familiars. You'll be moved in a delivery truck and awakened near the manor after sunset. An evac team will be nearby to extract you once the mission is complete.
Javier shrugged, his confidence unshaken.
Sounds simple enough.
Hector's gaze swept across the group.
At the risk of sounding redundant, do not engage. Your job is to retrieve the map and notes and return. If you encounter Morgan, survive.
The Carrion Eaters exchanged uneasy glances, but nodded in agreement. With the mission laid out, they filed out of the room. As they left, Leon lagged behind. The question about his brother burned at the back of his throat, but he swallowed it. He would deal with Javier after they survived the night. Next day, the delivery truck rumbled to a stop on a deserted road, the sound breaking the eerie silence of the dusk. The dying light of the sun was already a memory as the vehicle's rear doors swung open. One by one, the Carrion Eaters emerged. They donned their masks, their weapons gleaming faintly in the fading light. Before them loomed the old manor, a structure that seemed to breathe its own decay. The once grand building was now a hulking shadow of its former self. Broken windows glared like hollow eyes, and the wind carried faint whispers that seemed to come from nowhere. Leon adjusted his mask, his gaze fixed on the manor's towering frame.
Charming.
This place gives me the creeps.
Let's get this over with.
Wade hefted his shotgun, his posture tense. The Carrion Eaters approached the front steps, their boots crunching on the overgrown gravel path. Unseen by them, a pale, childlike figure watched from the shadows of the second-floor window, her eyes gleaming with both fury and excitement. Her tiny hands gripped the sill as her lips curled into a smile, revealing a hint of sharp, predatory teeth.
How rude, coming into my house, thinking they can take me on.
She whispered to herself, her tone playful but seething with anger.
Company is company, though. Let's have a little tea party.
She gave a diabolical giggle and ran excited. As the Carrion Eaters pushed open the unlocked front door, they were greeted by an oppressive silence. The house seemed to breathe around them, and the air inside was thick with the scent of rot, mildew, and something faintly metallic. The mission had officially begun, but none of them could shake the feeling that they were already being watched.
Smells like something died in here.
Something did.
Stephanie glanced around, scanning the darkened corners of the grand foyer. The manor's interior was a decrepit labyrinth. Broken furniture lay scattered across the floor, cobwebs hung in heavy drapes from the high ceiling, and water-stained wallpaper peeled from the walls like old skin. The silence was unnerving, broken only by the occasional creak of the floorboards beneath their feet. They moved cautiously, following Hector's directions. The stairs to the second floor lay ahead, but the hallway leading to them stretched long and dark. As they passed a room on their left, Leon stopped abruptly, his gasp drawing the others' attention.
What is it?
He gestured toward the open doorway. The others stepped closer, and their eyes widened in horror. Inside the room, a grotesque tea party was arranged around a dust-covered table. 3 eyeless corpses sat propped in chairs, their heads tilted unnaturally. One of them had its eye sockets covered by crude bandages and a pair of oversized sunglasses. Surrounding the table were dozens of dolls and stuffed animals, their glassy eyes gleaming in the faint light from a single flickering bulb overhead.
What the hell is this?
It's a message. Someone's idea of art.
Wade shook his head.
This is sick.
Christina took a step back, her gaze lingering on the dolls.
Let's keep moving. Whatever this is, it's not why we're here.
The group nodded, leaving the macabre scene behind as they pressed further into the house. But as they stepped into the next hallway, something changed. The air grew warmer, heavier, and a faintly sweet scent filled their nostrils.
Do you smell that? I think it's cotton candy?
Leon asked, his voice tense. Stephanie turned, her eyes narrowing.
What is wrong with...
Her words faltered as the hallway before them transformed in an instant. The peeling wallpaper smoothed itself into intricate patterns of gold and white. The rotting wood underfoot was replaced with gleaming, polished floors. Luxurious furniture appeared, and toys, bright and new, were scattered across the space. The air was filled with a faint, whimsical melody, as if from an old music box. The Carrion Eaters froze, their weapons drawn as they scanned their surroundings.
What the hell just happened?
Wade hissed. Christina knelt, running her fingers over the floor.
It's an illusion, but it feels so real.
Javier's smirk returned, albeit shakier this time.
Well, I guess she's rolling out the red carpet for us, isn't she?
Stephanie exhaled slowly, gripping her void sword tightly.
This isn't a welcome. It's a warning.
The house seemed to breathe around them, the walls shifting subtly as if alive. In the distance, faint laughter echoed, a high-pitched, childlike giggle that sent a shiver down their spines.
Let's keep moving. The faster we're out of here, the better.
Leon said, his voice firm. The Carrion Eaters pressed forward, their unity holding firm as the unseen presence around them grew stronger, tightening like a noose. The hallways seemed to twist and stretch unnaturally, the ornate furniture and toys beginning to warp into grotesque forms. The faint music box melody slowed, its cheerful tune distorting into something sinister. Without warning, the house erupted into chaos. The lights flickered violently, and shadows leaped from the walls, distorting into monstrous, writhing shapes. The Carrion Eaters were yanked apart as the floor beneath them gave way, creating endless, diverging corridors that swallowed them as they slid down.
Stay together!
Leon shouted, but his voice was swallowed by the growing cacophony of whispers and laughter. Leon found himself back in his brother Anthony's car, the faint smell of gasoline and cigarettes filling his nostrils. The rearview mirror reflected Anthony sitting in the back seat of the car, while Leon's hands gripped the steering wheel. Alongside Anthony, a shadowy figure loomed behind.
You let me die,
Anthony whispered, his voice echoing inside Leon's mind. The car filled with laughter, Javier's laughter. Leon screamed, pounding on the windows, but they wouldn't shatter. Stephanie stood in a dark alley, her void sword glowing faintly in her shadow hand. Around her, shadows whispered her name, calling her a failure, a traitor. When she swung her sword, it passed through them like air. Richard's voice, cold, biting, rose above the din.
You killed me to save yourself. You promised me we would be together till the end.
It sneered accusatory. Stephanie clenched her fist, but she had no strength. Her body trembled as a blood tear streaked her face. She fell down to her knees, guilt consuming her, but Richard's voice only laughed in return. Christina was in her old home, standing before Julio. His face was kind but distant, his hand outstretched.
I'm sorry. I wanted to save you, but you betrayed me. For power, not for love.
She tried to deny the claim, but her voice would not come out. Christina tried to reach him, but he faded like smoke when she tried to grasp his hand. In his place, the shadows morphed into Ivan's face, his eyes glowing with cruel amusement.
For power.
Wade found himself back in the prison yard where his father had been executed, the grimy concrete beneath his boots stained with old blood. The faint clang of metal doors echoed in the distance. From the shadows, his father, William Morning, came out.
You are weak. You know she was part of my murder, but you lack strength to do something about it. Pathetic. Coward.
Javier staggered through a corridor that seemed to fold in on itself, his head pounding with the return of his psychic headaches. The laughter around him grew louder, each note stabbing into his mind. He gritted his teeth, clenching his fists as he stumbled forward. Complete darkness surrounded him, and only a light in the center revealed the corpse of a peasant farmer strangled by his innards.
Papa!
Javier whispered incredulously. He stood there in silence for a moment, gazing at the spot where he had discovered that the cartel had made an example of his father. His eyes closed by the pain in his head growing sharper, nearly blinding him. But he chuckled. He opened his eyes and in tears he laughed out loud. Summoning his telekinesis, he shoved the psychic energy outward in a violent burst. The shadows around him exploded into fragments, the oppressive atmosphere giving way to the entrance hall of the house. Javier stood there, his head feeling like it would split apart. The others were frozen, scattered across the room like statues. He didn't need to see behind their masks to know that their faces contorted in silent terror.
Impressive.
Javier turned sharply, shotgun raised, to see Morgan sitting in an ornate chair. She was but a small child, yet her presence filled the room. Her pale face glowed faintly in the dim light, and she caressed a plush cat in her hands. Her wide, doll-like eyes fixed on him with a mixture of curiosity and menace.
You escaped my little game. How clever. My grandchild is not entirely useless after all,
She said, her tone mockingly congratulatory. Javier lowered his shotgun slightly but kept his stance defensive.
You know me?
I smelled little Jack on you the moment the truck turned the corner. He was such a sweet boy.
Listen, we're not here to fight you. We just need something, and we'll be out of your way.
Morgan swung her legs idly over the chair's armrest and tilted her head.
So you didn't come here to murder me? But to steal. Is that it? That's terribly rude. Grandma will have to teach you some manners, little boy.
She giggled, the sound echoing unnaturally. Javier's grip tightened on his weapon.
Listen, we're here to use what we find against the King's Court. You want them gone too, don't you?
Oh, I don't care about your little squabbles. What I do care about is how you and your friends thought you could waltz into my home without an invitation and not pay a price.
She hopped down from the chair, her movements unnervingly smooth.
I think I'll make you guests at my tea party. Leave you languid, collect your eyes, and arrange you with your mouths agape around the table. Then we'll see if little Jack grows a spine to visit his poor mother. If he doesn't, you will have no choice but to stay with Nana forever. But if he does, well, the more the merrier.
She finished with a dark smile on her face. Javier took a step back. He braced himself, summoning his telekinetic energy, even as his head throbbed, rattling the broken furniture in the room.
Well, if that's the way it's gonna be.
Morgan's grin widened, her knife gleaming as she prepared to lunge forward. The room exploded into chaos once more as Javier prepared for the fight of his life. The air in the room crackled with tension as Morgan circled Javier, her small frame belying the sheer menace radiating from her. Her knife glinted in the faint light. Javier's fist tightened, the pain in his head pulsing like a drumbeat, but he refused to show weakness.
You're brave. Bravery is cute. Foolish, but cute.
I'm not here for games. Let my friends go.
Oh, but we were just getting started. Let's see what my grandchild is capable of.
Before Javier could react, she darted forward, her movements unnervingly fast. Faster than Leon, faster than Oppenheimer, faster than Akasha. Her knife slashed through the air and he barely managed to dodge. Her speed sent him stumbling backward, his feet skidding on the polished floor. She advanced again, this time drawing blood.
Too slow,
She taunted, her voice light and sing-song. She blurred to his left, her form flickering like a shadow. She was everywhere and nowhere, her illusions making her a ghost in the room. Javier cursed under his breath, summoning his telekinetic power. Knives and shards of debris around him lifted into the air, spinning like a deadly whirlwind. He launched them in every direction, forcing her to retreat, but the exertion sent a fresh wave of pain lancing through his skull. He winced, clutching his head for a moment too long. Morgan appeared before him, her knife grazing his shoulder before he managed to hurl her backward with a telekinetic shove. She landed gracefully, laughing as if it were all a game.
Is that the best you've got? You are so weak, even Mr. Snuggles could take you on.
Javier gritted his teeth, forcing himself to stand straight. Blood dripped from his shoulder, but he ignored it. He reached out with his mind, pulling a shattered chair leg toward him and flinging it like a spear. Morgan sidestepped it effortlessly, her eyes gleaming with amusement. From the shadows behind him, a hulking 9-foot-tall plush cat and teddy bear hybrid monstrosity emerged. Its fur was grimy and tattered, its eyes glinting malevolently. With terrifying speed, the monstrous toy wrapped its oversized arms around Javier's neck, lifting him off the ground before slamming him down with a force that shook the floor. The bear pounded his head against the floorboards, each blow rattling his skull. Javier could barely move, the crushing weight rendering him helpless.
Getting tired, aren't we? And look at you, breaking yourself for them. Pathetic.
She gestured toward his frozen companions. Outside Javier's mind, his body was slumped on the floor. His eyes rolled back, white and sightless, while drool spilled from the corners of his mouth. Morgan's psychic hold pressed harder, forcing her power into him with relentless intensity.
I'm going to turn your mind into mush. And when I'm done, we'll have the loveliest tea party with what's left of you.
She hissed, her childlike voice laced with glee. But then something unexpected happened. Javier began to laugh. It started as a low chuckle, rising into a deranged, maniacal cackle. The sound echoed through the room, loud and unsettling, cutting through Morgan's concentration. A grin faltered and a flicker of confusion danced across her face.
What's so funny, little bird?
She snapped, her tone sharp but still tinged with mock sweetness. Her small hands clenched into fists as she bore down harder, with her psychic assault dropping her knife to the floor.
Laughing won't save you. Stop it! I said stop!
Javier's laughter only grew louder, unhinged and defiant. Drool flew from his mouth as his body convulsed on the floor, but his mind resisted her power. The air around him shimmered with the force of his will as he held her assault at bay. He pulled more and more psychic power from the raven. As he convulsed on the floor, his voice came out as if he was possessed.
You think you can scare me?
He spat, his voice a growl of pure determination. Inside his mind, the grotesque plush monster pounded him mercilessly, its claws tearing into his flesh, but he didn't falter. He gritted his teeth, his defiance unwavering.
I was born on Dia de los Muertos. I watched my papa get gutted and strangled with his own entrails by the cartel when I was 6. I crossed the river alone when I was 9. And I killed my first man at 13. You know, not because I had to. I killed him because I wanted to. And I liked it!
Morgan observed Javier writhing on the floor, his body betraying him with spasms and drool pooling at the corners of his mouth. Yet within the chaos, his mind burned like an engine pushed far beyond its limits. Through their psychic connection, flashes of his memories surged into her consciousness. She saw the young boy grinning maniacally as he lit a homeless man on fire, his eyes gleaming with the dark joy of destruction. It was raw, feral, and unrelenting.
You can scare Oppenheimer, Akasha, the Tower, the Court, but not me. Not me! I am Javier Chavez, the Bird of Doom. So bring it!
Javier growled, his laughter turning into a battle cry. The plush monstrosity in his mind roared, its claws ripping through him, but Javier pushed harder, his psychic will exploding outward. Morgan staggered, clutching her head as the force of his defiance broke her hold. Javier woke up from the illusion and lunged forward, grabbing the knife she had dropped. With both hands, he drove it into her chest, his movements fueled by desperation and fury. She paused, smiling ever so slightly as she looked at the knife. Morgan froze, her small hand wrapping around the knife's handle. Her gaze softened as she looked into his eyes, seeing not just defiance, but an indomitable will to survive. Her lips curled into a faint smile.
You remind me of someone. Perhaps myself. A long time ago.
She said quietly, her voice almost tender. She reached out, touching his bloodied face with surprising gentleness, acknowledging her kin. The room fell silent. Javier had a look of tired disappointment in his face. She did not turn to ashes, and he felt as if he had lost his only chance.
You really are a stubborn little thing, aren't ya? I like that. Willpower is a rare gift. I'm not cruel enough to crush someone who's trying their hardest. Unfortunately, the Raven is not as merciful as I am, and you will pay for this.
Javier blinked, his body tense and ready for another attack, but Morgan lowered her knife and caressed the plush cat with it.
Take what you came for, then wake your friends and leave,
she said, her tone suddenly matter-of-fact. He didn't move, still wary.
And what's the catch?
She smiled again, this time without malice.
No catch. Just make sure to give the court a hard time, will ya? Winning is not for everyone, but you've earned this small victory.
With that, she turned and disappeared into the shadows, her voice lingering like a whisper. He stood there for a moment, his mind racing. The pain in his head throbbed, but relief washed over him. He turned toward the stairs, his resolve hardening. There was still work to be done. Javier staggered toward the grand staircase, the weight of his injuries and the psychic strain pressing heavily on him. He knew something was different. The raven inside him felt heavy. Every movement he took was a monumental effort. The once opulent manor seemed unnaturally quiet now, as though it too was holding its breath. Shadows flickered faintly along the walls, following him like silent spectators. Before he ascended, his eyes caught a massive, dust-covered painting hanging next the staircase. The first figure in the portrait was a regal and poised middle-aged woman. The second figure was a gentleman with a calm, diplomatic air, and the last one was Morgan, a pale, eerie child clutching a doll. Their gazes seemed to follow him, their eyes unnervingly lifelike.
Family. Hell of a legacy.
Javier muttered under his breath, his voice tinged with bitterness. The second floor stretched before him, the plush carpeting muffling his heavy footsteps. He followed Hector's directions to the lost one's room, pausing before the door. The wood was warped and splintered with age, the doorknob cold to the touch. Summoning the last of his strength, he pushed it open. Inside, the room was a time capsule of decay. The wallpaper peeled in long, curling strips, revealing discolored plaster beneath. A heavy wooden desk sat against the far wall, its surface covered in a thick layer of dust. In the corner, a safe loomed, its metal surface pitted with rust but still intact. Javier approached it, dropping to one knee as his fingers traced the dial. His hands trembled, both from exhaustion and the effort of suppressing his throbbing headaches. He exhaled sharply, focusing his telekinetic energy to manipulate the inner workings of the lock. With a satisfying click, the safe door creaked open. Inside were brittle yellowed papers bound together with a faded ribbon. He handled them carefully, his movements deliberate as he placed the fragile documents into a pouch designed for safe transport. His task was nearly complete. Turning to leave, Javier's vision blurred, the edges of his world darkening. He stumbled, his legs giving out as he collapsed against the doorframe. Gritting his teeth, he forced himself to stand, leaning heavily on the wall as he began his descent back to the first floor. Halfway down the staircase, his strength gave out entirely. He slipped, tumbling down the last few steps with a heavy thud. Pain flared through his body as he lay on the cold floor. For a moment he was tempted to close his eyes to let the darkness claim him, but he clenched his fists, dragging himself upright with sheer force of will. He crawled toward his frozen companions, the illusion still holding them captive. With the last reserves of his psychic power, he shattered the spell binding them. One by one they blinked, their bodies stiff as they reoriented to reality.
Javier, what the hell happened?
Leon's voice was the first to break the silence, filled with confusion.
We've got what we came for. Call the evac team and get us the hell out of here.
Before anyone could respond, he lost consciousness, his body finally succumbing to the night's trials. The others exchanged uneasy glances, but Stephanie knelt to check the pouch slung across Javier's shoulder. She opened it carefully.
It's here, he did it,
she said, her voice steady but low as she confirmed the presence of the map and notes. Leon stood, already reaching for his communicator.
Then let's get moving. We're not sticking around to see what else this place has in store.
The Carrion Eaters hoisted Javier between them. They stepped out into the night, calling for the evac team as the old manor loomed behind them, its dark windows seeming to watch as they disappeared into the shadows. The evac team's black van screeched to a halt at the rendezvous point, its doors flung open, as two familiars leaped out to assist the Carrion Eaters.
Get him in,
Leon barked. The familiars helped lift Javier into the van, laying him carefully across the back seat and removing his mask. The pain was etched into his unconscious expression. Wade climbed in after him, his usually steady demeanor replaced by a quiet concern. The rest of the Carrion Eaters climbed into the van, the vehicle roaring to life as the driver sped away from the old manor. The silence inside was deafening, each of them lost in their own thoughts, replaying the horrors of the night. Back at the tower's territory, Hector was waiting for them. His imposing figure stood stark with his arms crossed as he watched the van pull up. The doors opened and the Carrion Eaters stepped out, weary but triumphant.
Did you get it?
Hector demanded, his sharp eyes scanning each of them before landing on Stephanie, who clutched the pouch containing the notes and map. Without a word, she handed it over, her hands trembling slightly as she released it. Hector opened the pouch, carefully pulling out the brittle papers. His expression softened just enough to reveal a glimmer of approval.
Well done, you've earned your rest,
he said. The familiars carefully carried Javier into the building. Later, when dawn was fast approaching, Leon stood motionless at the foot of Javier's cot, the quiet hum of a faraway train the only sound in the room. His fingers curled tightly around the hilt of a knife, the cool steel grounding him as his thoughts swirled. Javier's body lay completely inert. The strain of the night's events was etched into his face. To Leon, looking at Javier served as a stark reminder of the man's betrayal, his brother Anthony's death, the lies that had led to it, and the role Javier had played. Leon's jaw clenched as memories surged to the surface. Anthony's laugh, his unwavering loyalty, the way he'd always looked out for him. And then the cold realization that Javier, the man who now lay helpless before him, was responsible for the events that led to Anthony's death. The knife in his hand trembled slightly as he raised it, his grip tightening. The edge caught the faint light, a sharp glint reflecting his own hesitation. His eyes flicked to Javier's face, pale and vulnerable. Leon exhaled shakily, his thoughts shifting to the night in the manor. Javier had risked everything, pushing himself to the brink to save them all. That defiance, that sheer will to survive, it wasn't the mark of a coward or a traitor. It was the mark of someone who, despite his flaws, was willing to give everything for his comrades.
You saved us, but you also killed him.
Leon muttered under his breath, his voice barely audible. His grip on the knife loosened. His mind battled between loyalty to his brother's memory and the gratitude he felt toward Javier. The weight of the decision pressed on him, heavier than the blade in his hand. He took a step closer, his gaze locked on Javier's still form.
If I do this, it won't be when you are helpless,
he said. Slowly, deliberately, he slid the knife back into its sheath. The tension in his shoulders eased, though his heart still warred within him. He turned and walked away, his footsteps quiet against the floor.
You're not off the hook.
The next night, the tower's underground garage hummed with the faint echoes of machinery. Leon was bent over the hood of his car, his hands slick with oil as he worked methodically to tune the engine. The rhythmic clink of tools against metal was the only sound, grounding him in the steady ritual of maintenance. Wade's heavy footsteps broke the silence, the warrior's broad frame appearing in Leon's peripheral vision. He wiped his hands on a rag and turned to face him.
What's up?
Leon asked. Wade hesitated for a moment.
Javier's awake. You should come.
Leon froze, his hand tightening around the wrench he held.
Awake? Is he...
Just come.
Leon tossed the rag onto the car's open hood and followed Wade through the corridors of the tower's underground hideout. When they entered the room, Javier lay on a cot in the center, his eyes open, but his body unnaturally still. Oppenheimer stood to one side, talking with Jolene, his expression unreadable. Stephanie and Christina were seated nearby, their faces tight with worry. Leon's gaze shifted to Javier.
What the hell is going on?
Jolene stepped forward, her face softened by a flicker of sympathy.
Javier is awake, but the curse of the raven has fully manifested. He's paralyzed. He can't move and he can't speak.
Willpower is a rare gift. Unfortunately, the raven is not as merciful as I am.